So, James, welcome to CTO Confessions. It's great to have you on board, sir.
Thank you, TC. Great to be here. Thank you.
So tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And who do you work for?
Sure. I'm James David Long. Maybe some people call me James Long or JD. And I work for Palomar Insurance Services out of San Diego, a specialty insurance company. And my background with technology is deep, but I haven't been in IT most of my career because I started my career as a quantitative risk modeler. So running often in parallel with technology, but not being part of the technology org. But been writing software since the 90s. My background is actually educationally as an agricultural economist. That's why you may see some toy tractors up here over my head on my bookshelf. But I am my education is in agricultural economics. And I quickly learned that if I could write my own analysis software, it would put me ahead of those who had to wait for somebody else to do it. So I kind of came in what was precursor to data science, right, where we're writing effectively software to answer analytical questions, as opposed to desktop applications.
Yes.
Although I did some of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got to mention the fact, when I read your LinkedIn, you called yourself a weird executive. I thought I made me lol. Okay, that was a real lol moment. And I love meeting people like yourself because you're a real blend of different,
absolutely,
as you just described, backgrounds and skill sets. And not only knowing them, you've kind of done them as well.
Right. So, I've everywhere I go, everyone complains about the lack of domain knowledge in the tech side. But what's interesting is a lot of organizations want a long pedigree in tech in order to float up. So you're saying, well, if you got to be 25 years, doing tech only, to be an executive in tech, you're not going to have the domain knowledge of the other parts of the organization. So I've got this weird background where I was, running a team in a global reinsurance company that was a risk solutions team where they were using IT tools and doing ETL and building reports, but they weren't part of IT. Now, it wasn't Ghost IT. It was supported. We built on the platforms that were managed by IT, but we discovered that, we could move a whole lot of ETL work and a lot of reporting outside of the traditional IT build cycle and move it into the business if we just hired technical people in the business. So I have an experience of saying, well, why do we draw these lines where we draw them, right? A whole bunch of what we need at the front of our business, so hand in hand with our business users, can be built by, data scientists or, I would tell recruiters, bring me a bank analyst who is taking Python classes. Because they show me that they understand a business. They're in the business. They're using Excel. I don't give a shit. And, they're using Excel. I don't mind. But they're taking Python and they're curious about coding. I could take that person and deploy them in the front lines, doing ETL work and sitting right there with business users, in finance or in risk management or in actuarial. And they'd be tremendously effective, right? Instead of having this the business user talks to the BA, who then talks to the developer, who's God knows where and doesn't have a relationship with the business user.
Yes.
My approach has been to blur that line, and it's been tremendously effective.
Brilliant. I love it. I love hearing this. And I've had conversations with other techies and other business people because I kind of sit in this kind of weird world of, I've been in tech, as I described you offline, I've been in tech for many, many years, done electronics and what have you. But I am also really curious as business because ultimately all businesses are a part of the business digital world and they're just specializations in it. So, like when we talk about techies and we say that they're full stack and then we have full stack T-shaped people. Have you heard that term before?
Oh, yeah.
And then we have pie-shaped people. And then you have the magic ones, which sounds like what you are, which is the comb, right? Where you got, you got the combs. And this doesn't just apply to techies. I mean, there's kind of pie-shaped and T-shaped business people as well, as you describe. They've got their subject matter expertise, but they've also got this curiosity or even skill set around the tech side of things.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm looking for combs, right? That's a big thing I think about. Now, I need folks with deep expertise, right? Like I want the guy who's running my CI/CD to have deep depth of knowledge in, Kubernetes and GitHub Actions and he need not have the breadth of knowledge across the whole business, right? He needs to be specialized. So I've got roles that I absolutely want folks really specialized, deep knowledge, but I got a lot more roles.
Yes.
Where I need, I'm in insurance and reinsurance. So if I have, data executives who, VPs who understand what a reinsurance contract is, that's really critical because they're going to be able to understand what matters, what's optional, how to navigate the day in, day out challenges. And that is way more effective in my experience than hiring the person who's super narrow and 3 miles deep. I use those people, or I want to put those people in a strategic role, right? Where their depth of knowledge is strategically leveraging some function. And then most of the rest of the folks, I need some breadth.
Yes, I 100%. I think that's the great. And what's the tricks? I'm curious what's the trick to find these people? Because they're there, right?
Yeah, the breadth people?
Yes.
Part of it is you got to give guidance to your recruiters. Because if you're looking for they're not used to looking for this. And for me, it took some back and forth. Now I have an in-house recruiter now, but in my previous life, we used, agencies. And one of the things I discovered was that thing I shared just a minute ago about how find me a bank analyst who's taking like data science or coding classes. The reason that's a strong signal is they're working as an analyst, so they've got business knowledge. And they're curious enough about these other things to be studying them in their own time. The indicator is, to me, they'll probably get frustrated that they're having to use Excel and not use Python or R or whatever. They'll probably get frustrated and may already be frustrated in wanting to change to use more code-based tooling. And a whole bunch of what we do in organizations, if you're not on the specific application development level, a whole bunch of the code, we're not needing the person with the depth of knowledge of every JavaScript library.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a person who can write some code, put basic structure around it, basic test, use a CI/CD pipeline, somebody else has set up, but they're, maintaining their piece on it, and they understand the problems we're trying to solve.
Yeah, I love it. Yes.
And so what I do is look for these indications that a person has domain knowledge, and also look for these indications that they have a tech interest or that they're studying other aspects of tech in their free time. I've got an analyst who's only ever had jobs in insurance and reinsurance, and he maintains open source software. I'm like, wow, that's a unicorn, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
He's deeply in the business and he's deeply into software. And I'm like, if I can find indications of that, I'll try to grab those people.
Brilliant. And do you call him a unicorn?
Not to his face.
but I think this is really, really good for our audience out there. So any techies listening to this, especially the aspiring tech leaders, want to get into, is to really get curious around stuff. You can be, a subject matter expert in the area you're in, but look outside of it, build up your T-shapedness or your combedness. I coach a lot of leaders in the space, and one of the things that I've had one person say to me says, I want to be a comb-shaped person. And I thought, absolutely brilliant. I wish more people would say that, because that curiosity then starts to create their openings, and conversations lead to real things happening, maybe even just mentoring in that area.
No, I think that's right. And, one of the things I'll never criticize like my developers for is, so I think of like in my org, I've got them broken out as application developers, data developers, and quality developers, quality engineers, so like quality engineers, data, and more application based. When I'm talking about them here saying developers, I mean all these folks. So that's data engineers, it's my quality engineers, it's people writing application development, just all of those roles, and to some degree, technical analysts.
Yes.
If we are not under a really hard, delivery deadline for end of quarter, I will never criticize them for spending time sitting down with somebody in the business to understand a business process. Like that is one of the best uses of their time, is to deeply understand what we're doing. And if I find one that can ask the question of, how does this drive financial performance in our organization? If they can tie a process they're doing to financial performance, once again, that's unicorn markers, right? They're thinking about the system. We have a system where we take investor capital and we turn it into ROE.
Yes.
And tech is a piece of that. And if they can understand how what they're doing fits into that system, or the tech systems feed that bigger corporate system, they'll be way more effective.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because early days of my software career, I remember working on systems, and I had my own little kind of area to work on. I was embedded, so there was no flashy graphics or
right.
I mean, the most we ever got to was make an LED flash. You know, that was the most exciting thing that anyone could see. But we never, later on, thankfully this was addressed, but we didn't actually know what we were working on. We didn't know the big picture, and I think that was always a disadvantage, because we would just deliver stuff, you know. We didn't really know where it fitted. It ticked the box as far as I'm concerned. I'm done. Throw it over the fence. Right. And that's not cool. So yeah, I think that's a really good shout out. Get people that are also curious around a particular industry, you know, to get them involved in that. So, and you described that you kind of like jumped from, you kind of like meandered. Would meandered be the right word? You know,
I have meandered. You know, in my career, from I was a number of years as a consultant for KPMG in their financial risk management practice. Now, even there, there was technology involved, but I was not part of the tech consulting group. I was part of financial risk management. But we were building the quantitative models for valuing derivatives, and helping the likes of Korean Airlines hedge their diesel fuel exposure, and helping them write the tooling that would help them know when do I need to put a hedge on and where to properly manage my risk, right? So you can see how it begins to blur into software. The focus, the hard part here is the financial engineering, but we got to show them, maybe give them a little interface into Excel, a user, where the needs are and what hedges you have on. And, they could have gone out and bought a $100,000 system, but their challenge was really pretty straightforward, right? It didn't need this huge system to manage that. So we helped them do it, using less expensive tools. And, similarly, I then went and did stochastic modeling at a health insurance company. So once again, stochastic modeling, it was heavy on computation. There was a lot of computer software, not part of the risk organization. And then I was 15 years with Renaissance Re before joining Palomar.
Yes.
And in Renaissance Re, we had a group called, ultimately became named Risk Solutions, and then Portfolio Solutions. And it was this highly technical, quantitative, more data science, data engineering, but rolling up outside of IT. So IT ran the platforms, and we put things on the platforms and would build teams up to do that. And so, as CTO at Palomar, this is my first CTO confession. So get ready. My first job in the technology part of a company is as CTO at Palomar.
Wow, cool. Congratulations. Congratulations. That's brilliant.
So once again, very atypical career path. Now, I wrote my first software that was used in anger in business in 1996. So I have been, and interestingly enough, it was related to crop insurance, and Palomar owns a crop insurance company. And so that knowledge that I have going back 30 years is very valuable here, right? But if you look at it on paper, this is my first job in tech.
Yeah, wow. Love it. It's strange, isn't it? So coming now to Palomar, Palomar, yeah?
Palomar. Not Paramore either. This Palomar.
So if coming to that then, I've kind of had a bit of research. I mean, you kind of describe some of the stuff you're doing there. What is the actual problem that they're solving in the market? Because I think that helps the audience kind of tune into what we're about here.
Sure. So Palomar is well, depending on how you slice the market, the second largest writer of earthquake insurance in the U.S.
Wow.
And we can quibble over, the largest is a government entity in California, but we're roughly the second largest. Now, in addition to that, we're the second smallest crop insurance writer. So we've just stood that line up, and we're growing it. We won't be the
Right.
second smallest for long. So, and then we also that's let's see, the earthquake is 40% of our business or so right now, and it will continue to shrink, not because we're shrinking in that area, but we're growing in others like the crop space.
Yeah.
And then we have a breadth of other specialty reinsurance lines that we do. But from surety to construction, inland marine, all of these kind of different specialty insurance needs. The things that in the UK you guys see show up maybe in Lloyd's of London.
Yes.
We're a US writer, US based, focusing on those. So what our technology tools are doing, we should map that on to then, well, what does the tech org do?
Yeah.
The tech org builds the applications that an agent typically is using to put policyholder information into, to then write and bind an insurance policy, record that, report the financials off of it, and be regulatorily compliant in that whole process.
Wow.
So that, on more retail products, we could have, 7,000-8,000 users, and other lines where there's only 2 underwriters and a handful of agents, an application may have 25 users, and the business is coming in through those 25 users, or 6,000 agents spread all across, multiple states in the US. So it varies wildly. And then the idea is we got to move all that data in reliably and provably correct, and then report off of it, bill off of it, understand the cycles of our business. And, our data team takes that data and then make sure we can do reporting off of it, make sure we can do analytics, ensure data quality. So a whole bunch of this is you build the tools, you run the tools and the foundation of the policy administration systems, and then you make sure you can extract the data out to understand the business and run the business, do financial reporting, do forecasting, and meet your regulatory obligations. So that's a bunch of, where my time is thinking is, well, how do we launch a new product faster?
Yeah.
So we want to grow. We're in a growth phase. Company's only 10 years old. So we're very much in a growth phase. So we need to launch new products. Every new product needs the software to put in front of an agent to take that policy in. So we're looking at how do we accelerate that without ending up with a spaghetti mess on the back end.
Yep.
We can stand up a process that pulls it in and then just dumps it in the bed of a truck, proverbially, and that's not a good solution, right? No. So we want to pull it in quickly, but then drop it into something where the data team can grab hold of that and do the right things with the data. And then in the middle there, we have to deal with billing. We have to deal with finance in terms of getting them the data they need. We got to make sure the actuarial team has the data they need. So we're building these processes from launching applications quickly to start bringing business in to capturing it properly. So that's where I spend most of my time.
So it sounds like a very, very agile environment because everything's changing all the time. I mean, everything's changing anyway, but I imagine it's changing on a particular rate here. And pardon the pun, being in insurance, the risks around this are quite big as well. Because you get it wrong, the models can be quite a costly learning curve.
Absolutely.
What are the feedback loops that you have here to make sure that your models and your software is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing?
So there's multiple facets of the question you just asked. There's, did we bring in the business and capture it in our system in the appropriate way? So that's sort of a purely operational, did we execute in capturing the policy as the agent input it and effectively get it in a database? so that it's accurate, complete, and timely.
Yeah.
And we have some feedback loops on that. One of the things I'm actively doing right now, and I've only been at Palomar about 9 months, we had in some cases, the first quality check on that data was our finance team.
Right.
And that's a miss from my point of view. They should be a last line of defense, not a first line of defense. So if there was, for example, we had an API that periodically would fail, as APIs do in loosely coupled systems, and it wasn't doing sufficient alerting to a failure. It was popping it in a log, but nobody was paying attention. And so one transaction out of 1,000 would be missing.
Yeah.
And finance was having to catch that, and it was infrequent enough that they had to do thorough testing, but it would only show up, I don't know, maybe every quarter or two, right? Because of the frequency of the failures was quite low. And I'm like, okay, we need we need some work here to change the way we're doing monitoring and observability. So we first fix the timeout, right? So fix the retry so that it doesn't just time out and, with one failure or two failures. Let's figure out how to do more robust API connection and make that our normal approach. And on top of that, so this is a both and, we fix the root cause there, but we, in addition, need better alerting and better monitoring to know, and one of the piece of feedback I got from my operations team is, the logs are really cluttered because there's a lot of normal errors. I'm like, whoa, time out. We shouldn't have normal errors.
Yes.
Right. This is the nuclear power plant with a light that always just randomly flashes red and it doesn't mean anything. And then one day it does mean something, right? That's a really bad design. So I'm like, okay, I would like you all, if we can't solve the quote unquote normal errors, if we've got things that are popping those, we need to solve them at the root cause, make them not pop, or have a system that is highly specific to those errors. Like if it is one of our vendor systems that we can't really control the error reporting, it's just noisy, very precise filter to capture that error and that error only and get it out of what you filter it. So when you're looking at the only errors I want in there are things that need attention.
Yes.
Because, and this is like a human-machine interaction problem, right? This is like a cybernetics problem. And I feel like it's easy to not pay enough attention to this. Like, how do we know when something goes wrong? Or how do we know if this is an important thing or just BAU, business as usual? So, we took a little time and began to figure that out. And we're still working on how to improve that process. But I'm like, let's spend some time thinking about this. So just to recap the journey I just took on is I don't want my finance folks or the actuaries being the first line of defense, their last line of defense. I want other checks and balances, and those checks and balances in the middle have to be high signal, low noise.
Yes.
My challenge I just said is we had kind of low signal, high noise, and errors were getting lost in there because it wasn't obvious what was real and what wasn't, right?
I think that's a really good point, actually. In fact, the techie in me, I haven't done any programming for a long time, but I do remember looking at debug logs, and logs of systems. And you're absolutely right. There is absolutely no clarity as to what's going on. I think if you're looking for something specific, then you'll go and find it. But for the log to actually going to give you an indication, well, actually this is happening, and you might want to know about this. The systems aren't there. It's basically just I'm going to use I don't know if this is a US term or a barfing up data.
Barfs it in there, right?
Barfs it in there and it goes, it's there if you want it.
That's good if you're doing like a retrospective. So you need a bunch of that, but we got to distinguish between what needs human attention and intervention and what is just, this is here. And it's basically like, that's why you're supposed to have these log settings, right? Where I can have information, warning, and errors.
Yes.
The reality of real life is some systems throw routine errors.
Yes. Yeah.
And the error of this timed out, I retried, it was successful on retry. I don't care. Right? I mean, you do want to care because if you want to go back and say what percentage of retries are we having? I mean, you need that information captured. That's not an error. That requires no intervention, right? So the problem is that's a normal error. Right. I think that should be informational. And the only error is I tried and couldn't, and I failed hard.
Yes, that's right. It didn't happen.
that should be a noisy failure, right? And really grab people's attention. And unfortunately, sometimes that's set by the vendor. Like it logs a retry as an error. And that would be an example of a quote unquote normal error. We got to get that out. I want the error where it's like something bad has happened and we have lost data. It didn't go to the system it was supposed to because of a failure. It
reminds me of the lean manufacturing model, the Toyota line where somebody could press the red button.
Or pull the cord or whatever it's called.
We need to stop because this is happening and we need to fix it now. Otherwise, it's just going to keep on repeating itself. I love this term that you used there, which is noisy failure. And I think that signal to noise ratio analogy really works for me. So techies, really take notice of this, because I think sometimes the information there to actually make your life easier, because this stuff creates noise actually in the space as well. It's not just in your logs. It's actually, it causes problems. It causes re-effort. It causes people to audit stuff again. It creates a whole nervousness around reliability. Can I really trust this to do what it's supposed to do? So get rid of that out of your space and make your life better, man.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned the trust issue is because, my second confession here is that a bunch of what I am doing in my current job is helping folks outside of tech build trust in our tech systems. Sure. Because of things explicitly like what I just mentioned, where a timeout happens and it wasn't alerted properly and we lost data and finance found it. That happens 5 times. Finance doesn't trust you anymore.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't. They have a reason why they should. Like it's empirically, fact driven that you can't reliably do your job. And they will, if that continues without attention, remediation, and apology, they will develop the mindset of technology team is slapdash. They don't care about details the way we care about details. Yeah. We have to check everything they do.
Wow. And there's a cost to that.
Huge cost, because it takes a lot of bodies in finance to validate this system, talk to this system. We have to validate that. And we also run into it drives architecture. So when finance says, you all move that data to another system and we can't trust it, we need reporting built off the source system.
Right.
Oh, but I've got a data lake model, right? I'm moving the data over here and want to do reporting off that. I go bronze, silver, gold, and then my reporting layer. And they're like, don't care. We don't trust that you did that. I need a report off the source system.
Yeah.
And that's what you end up, that drives, that's a bad architecture, because now what's come through your data lake or your data warehouse isn't going to necessarily match. You're going to have 2 versions of business logic, the version that's on the report that finance wants out of the source system and the version that comes off your data warehouse or data lake. And they're invariably going to have slightly different settings. And you're going to be sitting in a meeting and you have CEO say, why don't these 2 numbers match?
Yes. Yeah.
And the answer is, finance doesn't trust tech because tech has let them down. And therefore, finance went and had somebody build reporting off of the source system because we have demonstrated that we can't do that reliably. And that's not the answer. I mean, nobody will say that. That would be a true root cause analysis. And so we got to build trust and change architecture.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to get a fly on the wall kind of experience it in the walls of companies that you work in. I mean, I can really tell that you love this topic. You love it. I can really feel the passion around it, and also to do it well and to do it in a way that really serves. What's the communication like between the other aspects of the business? You just gave a good example there between tech and these business functions. Because the whole, quantitative, insurance industry is really complex. The more I look into it, it does make my head hurt, to be honest. The stuff actually goes on. What is the culture like there? Is it all very friendly, or does it get very kind of bun fighty where you kind of throw?
The reality is everything, right? And it varies wildly from company to company. And it varies wildly from time of the year, right? Yeah. So if, middle of the month, an IT system has a blip and we, have some problems and then we fix it, and we have a week to figure out what data was lost or whatever, that's annoying, but, everybody understands. If that happens during quarter close, there's a lot of tense Teams calls.
Yeah.
Because everyone's trying to do their job under a huge amount of pressure.
Yes.
As a publicly traded company, you have to get your filing done at a very specific time. We're regulated, and it's a huge black mark if you don't hit your deadlines for reporting. So it varies somewhat on timing, right? And one of the things I talk with my teams about is all time is not created equal. So developer time or analyst time, accountant, actuary, right at quarter close, their time is very dear, very expensive. Now, their time may be much less expensive in the middle of August. And so are there things we can do in the middle of August that take a little bit of time to make us fast and reliable when time is expensive? So, I may have developers or analysts or data scientists spend a bunch of time building reporting, and you look at it and you go, well, it took them, 40 hours to build that report, and you run it once a quarter, and it only takes, 45 minutes of analyst time or an hour of analyst time. You just spent 40 to save 4. I'm like, great trade. Because those 4 that I saved were during quarter close, when there's reporting pressure, when matters are when errors are very expensive, because you're about to put it in front of the board of directors, or you're about to put it in front of your executive team. I want those processes fast and reliable and quickly rerun if there's an error. So if they got a bunch of manual copying and pasting in there, that's potential for error. Right. Yeah. So, there's an XKCD cartoon about, how much time do you spend rewriting a process in order to get it returned? The failure in that model is it assumes all time's equal. And all time isn't equal if you have a reporting cycle or a regulatory set of deadlines in your organization. Right. So there's an example of you asked me the question of when's everybody, what's the communication like? Well, it's great in August. And, in the 11th of April, it can be tense because we're right now finishing up a quarter end reporting cycle for Q1, right? Okay. Yes. So it can vary. And I think this is wildly different from organization to organization. We bend over backwards to pull, I have tried to get myself and the IT side of the organization to not say the business, because it's like it creates 2 problems. One is like an us and them, and that's not helpful. And it also, the them is all one thing. They're all the business. They aren't all the business. It's actuarial, it's finance, it's the executive team, it's the underwriters, and they all have very different interests too. But you don't ever hear your finance team talking about the business. Why should IT talk about the business? We're all the business, right? So one of the things I try to do is get our partners in the different parts of the organization to spend time together, right? And not just with a BA. I want periodically a developer who works remote to go to La Jolla, California, camp out in a breakout room, and spend time with the people who use the software that developer writes, not through a BA, but through just sitting together. Maybe they're talking about specifications. Maybe they're working on a change together. Maybe the BA's in there, but it's real people. We need to do that periodically to keep those relationships high, because when that breaks, that software, that process, that machine, whatever breaks, it's so much easier if these people have sat in the room together. It is so much easier to resolve and fix than if they are a nameless, faceless person in another state.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. This is one of the things I'm very passionate about. I actually see businesses as a network of relationships.
Oh, it absolutely is. Absolutely.
And I think a lot of companies, it's really good to hear yourself talking about this, James, because I think, as you say, things are going to hit the fan at some point, right? It's guaranteed. So have the system in a way that it can recover, it can work well together, and that's all down to relationships. I love this idea. As you were describing that, I always thought of it like kind of speed dating, but within the business, for in different kind of relationships.
Right. So it's like, what if I do this right? What ends up happening is the developer maybe has 1 or 2 people that they're working with highly, but there's dinners. Anybody from out of town, plus a few people that are local, will go to dinner.
Yeah.
There's lunches. They may end up getting lunch, that developer, with, our legal counsel.
Yeah.
And I may or may not call some people from different parts of the organization and say, hey, we got a developer there. Take them to lunch, please.
Yes.
Or a different underwriter that's not involved in the project they're currently working on. Hey, can you have drinks with my developer? They're there. At least stop by and say hi.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sort of nudging the networking because I want these folks to all know each other.
Brilliant. I think that's a really good, a very intentional leadership tool that you're there, and I couldn't champion that. I think it's a brilliant idea. I want to come on to your leadership now. Okay, yes. I'm kind of getting a taste of what your type of leadership is like, James. Mm-hmm. But how would you describe your leadership? How would somebody describe your leadership style? What you're like? How do you roll?
We should get my boss. You send him a questionnaire and gotten him to evaluate me.
Yeah. I mean, like a live 360, but it's not quite.
That's right. Yeah. Do an interview with him on the side, then do an interview with me, and see how little we overlap. Right? Wouldn't that be embarrassing? So I try to be very high empathy, not being a patsy or setting myself up to be bullied, but trying to understand where folks are coming from. Now, inside of me, I'm excitable, I'm high emotion, but I'm 52 years old now. I have learned to wrap a bunch of that and not let that little guy inside of me, he's throwing his hands up in the air and be like, "This crazy as hell. What's going on? What's everybody?" Don't let him out. Maybe to my wife over dinner, but not, during the workday. Try to have enough prefrontal cortex to say, okay, stop having an emotional reaction, or focus less on the emotional reaction and focus more on understanding the other person's point of view and what questions you can ask them to figure out what's really going on. So I'm giving you that as an example of what I would think of as high empathy leadership. As opposed to command and control. Yeah. The other thing I try to do is, my background as an economist, when I rubbed against chaos theory and emergent systems, it became obvious to me this is how the world works. And so by that, I mean a whole bunch of stuff is self-organizing, and especially as it relates to people and information flows. And I think tech leaders sometimes fail because they want their people to work like a system where you give an instruction set in and you get a consistent, reproducible result out the other side. Yeah. People do not work that way. I mean, I've literally talked to tech leaders who their first step in making a change was to change the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, and then explain to everybody what's been changed there, as if that is the instruction set of a computer. And that is so ridiculously out of sync with reality that it's comical from my point of view, right? And I think most folks, if you think about it, that's not the starting point for change. That's where you memorialize change so people in the future will understand what are our ways of doing things. It's not how you initialize change. You initialize change in the hearts and mind of the people that are doing the thing. And then after you all conclude together, some with more persuasion than others, you memorialize that change in your process and procedures. Yeah. And that confusion, I think, causes a lot of tech people who find themselves in management great consternation, because they confuse how people work with how machines work, because machines don't self-organize. Quite the opposite. Machines, second law of thermodynamics, right? They gravitate towards chaos. Well, I can get people, and if people's heads are on right, and I have a culture of safety and trust, they can self-organize to be more effective than I could have micromanaged them into being. And I truly believe that. Yes. And my job is to try to figure out how to make that environment, not micromanage the individuals in that environment. And my measure for, is this working, is when I am seeing teams be effective without my involvement. my key performance indicator should be how little I do.
It's funny. Yeah. And I'm the reason why I smile and I'm kind of hesitating what to say because I'm trying to not bring some of my own examples about this.
I would love your examples. I bet others would too.
Become about my confessions. I think you're right because I have a passion around emerging systems. I like to think in systems, and so as the role of a leader, a modern leader, post-industrial age thinking, is to create the conditions for emergent behaviour, and we know what the outcomes we want to emerge because they're kind of like vision statements. They're kind of mini vision statements, and they're vision statements, mini vision statements that sit underneath the statements that you just made. And it allows people to kind of gravitate towards what you're seeing, and also then to kind of have a conversation around, well, actually, there's another way I see it. And I think this is happening more and more. So it's really good to hear you, James, kind of talking about this. What do you think we can do in the education system, in the training system, that can bring about more of this kind of leadership? Is it happening? I don't know. I'm kind of curious.
In our education system, one of the challenges is if we're thinking about what are we teaching and how are we teaching to work, ranking is incredibly unhelpful for collaborative thinking. And this is my problem with forced rank inside of organizations. And I don't particularly like it inside of education.
Yeah.
Lots of other people want that for a bunch of signaling reasons, but they're signaling, I'm an economist, so I'm thinking about signaling theory here in economics of it. It's not that I have the ability, it's that I can convince you I have the ability. So, but when you get to some point, like you've signaled your way to the top and you come in my organization, how do I get you to stop competing against your peers? Because I don't want you to compete against them. I want you to collaborate with them.
100%.
And those are mutually exclusive. Because if I am forced to do forced ranking, which I am not, and I would quit before I did. But if I was forced to do that, I set up a broken culture because if someone thinks they are right on the cusp of, say, the high bonus tier and the medium bonus tier, or heaven forbid, the bottom where it's between getting fired and keeping your job, there's every rational incentive for them to sabotage their peers.
Yeah.
Either to get them to knock someone out so they can get up, or to knock someone down so they don't get cut off and fired. And having that dynamic in the organization is fundamentally broken, and I will not be part of any organization that functions that way.
Yeah. It is strange how we've set up these systems. Yeah, I mean, again, this is industrial age thinking. This is it comes back from that ranking.
We're not racing to make widgets where my work is independent from yours. If you and I are working on a project, we're highly dependent on each other and the ability to collaborate. If the individuals on the team are not collaborating together, you never get an emergent system. Because that is the feedback loop that allows the team to emerge into effectiveness, is that they trust, they share ideas, they work together, and that keeps me from having to do that. If my system is low, my system trust, the trust of the individuals in the system is low with each other or with others, they won't self-organize in a way that's effective, and me or another manager has to come in and micromanage what they're doing. That doesn't scale. It's also not particularly effective. So if I was trying to, set up a factory to see who could put the ends on these pins individually the fastest, well, maybe I rank them and cut the bottom 10%, because then it just incentivizes them to work faster. Yeah. Software, technology, knowledge work, none of it works like that, because we're trying to create teams that are collaborative and better than the sum of the parts. As much as I hate to say synergy, right? Because it sounds like such a BS word. There is this sum of the parts is greater than, or the team is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yes.
That's what we're trying to get in an emergent system. So anyway, if I am glad I wasn't sure you had even heard of emergent systems, or, how things emerge amongst chaos. But I think it's an important part of leadership, regardless of where. And in tech, I think sometimes we're blind to it because this isn't how tech systems work, yet. Maybe if the AI and LLMs get better, we'll see different kind of emergence. But right now, the tech doesn't work that way. Or, somebody's in engineering. Well, there's no self-organizing of circuit boards. There's no self-organization around structural engineering. It all is going the opposite direction towards entropy. But with people, there can be. And the leader's job is to create the initial conditions and then monitor that and give feedback as needed, right? So I have told my team, I was editing a video from just today from a meeting we had. We had like a 2-day session on site in one of our offices. And I was editing the video, and I was reminded of the conversation we were having at the time where we were talking. I was asking the team how they think software development engineers should be graded or scored or evaluated. Right. And one of the conclusions we came from the end of that is the best way to do it is talk to the team leads and the peer 360 reviews of each other. And, my mantra is ask each person to evaluate the others on how they are effective and what they can do to improve their effectiveness. And somebody will say, well, define effective. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. You're going to define effectiveness. Yes. Because I want some engineers who are incredible mentors. And their effectiveness is going to be being a mentor. And maybe to improve effectiveness, could pay more attention to architecture because they have knowledge that they aren't sharing because they're doing just mentoring. Like, I want to balance that out. On the other side, you're going to have engineers who go in the hole and bang out features, right? They just put their headsets on and they go down. And they're effective in that way, and that's effective. But they could work on, being collaborative and making sure that things they produce are passed on so other people understand them. Sometimes those folks may not do the best documentation, and they could collaborate with somebody to get documentation better. So I can't make a metric that captures all the degrees of freedom or all the facets of a good engineer. But if I talk to everybody on the team, I can, in a day, understand what's going on with the team. Yeah. And honestly, the thing that's most important to me is to root out dysfunction.
Yeah.
So if I've got somebody, I don't know if a 10x engineer, how real that is, but a negative 10x engineer is real. Now, what does it mean to, somebody, by that, I mean somebody who lowers the effectiveness of a team.
Yeah.
And I'm way more concerned with okay, let's figure out how to root out dysfunction. I'll gladly pay them a severance package if they're not being effective because I'm bleeding productivity if I have a person that destroys the team. So let's either figure out, can we, if it's minor, can we just train? If it's larger, are they in the wrong role? And if we can't train it out or can't get them in the right role, we need to encourage them to pursue other options, because I can't have a team that's dysfunctional, because that is so costly.
It reminds me of the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Yes.
And people have different, the whole can become dysfunctional, but also you can have individual elements, the sum of that I refer to them as problem generators. I don't call them that, but that's what they are.
That's your mental pocket for that.
Yeah. But I think it reminds me, I'm going to do a confession, actually. I shouldn't be doing this. I remember a point in my career where I actually had that 360 kind of feedback loop back to myself. So just to kind of give a bit of context around this, all healthy systems have good feedback loops. What you described there, those 360s are feedback loop within the system, without the whole system having to know everything about it. It's just, it's self-organizing around that, so I was raising that awareness. So I remember in my career where I'd moved from electronics to software. Hopefully, some of the people I work with then kind of recognize this maybe. I'm a bit kind of nervous now. And I remember my boss coming up to me and saying, TC, you're a potentially really good engineer, but you're a waste of space and we're going to get rid of you because you're having a laugh, And it was that clarifying moment where the elephant had been called out. I thought I was getting away with it. I was having a bit of a laugh. I'm a reformed character, thank you. I'm not like that anymore. But I was having a bit of a laugh. I was slacking off. So I was a problem generator, not for any bad reason, but just because I could get away with it. And that reflection was just a beautiful moment because I had a choice. Is that what I want to be noticed for, or is that something that I want to do something about? And thankfully, I did something about it. And so that corrected my system. It corrected my, so in a way, that harsh feedback loop was one of the best feedback loops I ever had. It was the defining moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And those are going to happen. I think folks sometimes, though, can over-fixate on those when they're thinking about employee feedback or employee evaluation. And I think the way I like to think about it is I want to, as I talk to my engineering leads, I want to kind of know who's really like excelling this year. Is somebody like really doing some unusual things to move the team forward? I'm not even going to call them like a top performer because then it's like really confusing. And I'm like, just who's really super effective this year? And then I may ask, do we have any dysfunction? Do we have anybody that hurts team productivity? Or do we have any challenges, on that end? And then in the middle is a bunch of, I had a developer a couple weeks ago call them solid citizens. They should come in to work. They're reliable. They work tickets. They knock out, their development tickets. They're a joy to have on the team. They aren't a 10x engineer, but they're a solid citizen.
Nice.
Most of our organization is made out of solid citizens, and we should not underappreciate them.
Yeah, they're the backbone. If you think about it.
Right.
Yeah. Because we do have this thing about everybody's got to be a superstar, and not everybody has the ability to do that. I'm just thinking examples, some people can be that 10x because their life situation allows them to, do the all-nighters and do crazy kind of programming sprints, in their own time. Not that we want to encourage that, but some people have got families.
Right.
They just can't do it. They need to get that work-life integration together. So yeah, that's a really, really good take. I
had a developer who had a developmentally challenged kid. He was good, but he did not work late.
Yeah.
And he was busy on the weekends because they did a lot of work with their daughter to try to get her functioning in society. And he was what I would consider solid citizen, right?
Yeah.
And in a bunch of ways, he was more effective than most. But, and similarly, I had an engineering lead tell me after he pulled an amazing feat of effort, he told me, I can't do this every quarter. My marriage won't survive.
Yeah.
How can we not live this way? And I said, my intent to you is that you don't have to live this way. I want to simultaneously tell you I appreciate the heroics, but if heroics become the norm, we are in a state of dysfunction that hasn't become a catastrophe yet. But it's a state of failure. If you're having to run off of regular systematic heroics, that's not sustainable. And that, some of this gets glorified in startup culture because they're just sprinting to IPO.
Yeah.
I'm running an insurance company. We are not sprinting to IPO. We're trying to be deliberate, grow. We give stock to folks all the way up and down the ranks in order to have them have skin in the game. But there's no prize 4 years out where you get to retire. If you're, an early developer at an insurance company, right? You may have that. That may be what you think you're sprinting for at a startup. So you can Red Bull it 4 a.m. every morning and, and crank it out. But I need folks who can run a much longer race with me at a much more at a fast but sustainable pace.
The solid citizens you describe about, the ones you can rely on. And what was really great about that feedback that you got there, that wasn't just feedback coming from the system to the individual. That was coming from the individual to the system.
That's exactly right.
And you could hear it and you heard it and you acted on that. So I think this is a really good insight for anybody out there listening, looking to systems. I think we should all learn about systems because we are part of them, whether we like it or not. It's the water that we swim in. It's kind of going on around us. And I think that wisdom around that.
There's a quintessential book about systems thinking, and I can't remember the title right now. I'm drawing a blank. Maybe you and I can search for it offline and include it in the show notes.
Sure. Yeah.
It may just be called systems thinking. I can't remember, but it was written to kind of explain these ideas of what you and I are talking about when we think about systems.
Yeah.
The one of the other books that book, I read it, and a whole bunch of it was like, yes, I've been seeing this and I've kind of understood it, but I lacked the vocabulary to talk about some of the pieces. And I also felt the same way when I read The Design of Everyday Things, where it's like, I felt somewhat vindicated. Like, yes, I thought that was bad design. And, I thought those car dashboards, that don't have knobs were bad design. And I could even articulate why, but everybody looks at me like, no, this is just fashion. This is how we're doing it now. And I'm like, no, they're bad design, And so Design of Everyday Things was a helpful read, and that's all I can't remember the systems book that left me with the same feeling.
We'll add that to the text around the thing. So please do. I'm interested as well. I've got a particular one. We did a business agility conference recently at the Open University here in the UK, and we had some great systems. Patrick talks on it, and I'm not. I come from a software background, so this is an area that I'm really curious around and find interesting from the team dynamics perspective. So, and it's interesting when you learn this and you have those insights, and I was thinking like that as well. So it's a justifying kind of moment when you have that. So bring on that book. I had a question here. It was kind of a bit of a play on words, which was around risk. What's your risk profile like from a tech perspective?
That's interesting because I bring a lot more formal thinking around risk to tech than is common because I have spent most of my career doing technical things around risk. And so I think about this very, very deliberately. And I'll give you an example of a design pattern I have found helpful. And then I'll try to explain the framework. So a design pattern I have found helpful. We did this just a few months ago. We had, let's see, what was it? MongoDB is removing the GraphQL API from their core product. And so if you want to continue using GraphQL, you've got to add an additional GraphQL layer from a vendor or library or something else. So it was a piece of work, non-user facing, piece of work that needed to be done. The first estimate on this was done by a developer who basically just interviewed. He knew we were strapped, so he just interviewed consultancies around what would they charge to basically make the problem go away. So we had a set of numbers there, and then I had a developer who I sat down with, and I'm like, different developer. I'm like, I am at risk of oversimplifying this problem, but I understand basics of MongoDB. I understand the basics of GraphQL. This does not look like a multi-month, multiple tens of thousands of dollar problem. Do you think it is? So I was getting a second opinion. And I think actually I asked him his opinion before I told him mine, which is a skill I try to do because otherwise you get the problem of people want to follow the leader. And so the hardest part of this job is shutting up. By the way, that's my other confession. Let the other person speak first. And he had shared that he kind of thinks it shouldn't be that hard. And then I shared that I think that I didn't think it should be that hard. I said to him, can you spend an afternoon helping me figure out the options? And so he came back to me and said, like, I see 3 software packages, one of them's a fee. There's a couple of open source. I said, okay, that's great work for, an afternoon. How much time do you need to remove technical uncertainty around those 3 solutions and say, pick one? And I said, I want you to think about 2 parts of the problem. I said, the time and cost to implement it and your certainty around that. So not just how far out it is, but also how much uncertainty is there. Okay, what I just did is I just jujitsu'd in the mathematic principle of the mean and the standard deviation. Now, I didn't use those terms with him, but I almost did, right? I'm like, I want that kind of estimate of, if there's one that's going to take a little longer, but you're dead certain it can get done versus one that might go really fast, but you have a bunch of uncertainty. I was like, I want to weigh those. So spend a little time. And he said he could do it in 2 weeks. So I said, okay, great. 1 sprint cycle. That team, I said, let's work with your team and you're going to do that and that only for the next 2 weeks. And the objective wasn't to build the thing. It was to remove technical uncertainty from the choice. He came back to me at the end of that and he said, I have high confidence that this tool we should use. The reason is I did a quick technical spike connecting here and connecting there. And I did it with each of them. And this one is straightforward and immediately worked. And so I went ahead and built like one little pipeline out of it, and we tested it with meaningful volume, and it worked. So now what we need to do is we need to put, the deployment structure around it. We need to stand up in our multiple environment, the test, prod, dev. He said, so we got some work for production, but he said, I am highly confident that I can have this in production in 2 sprint cycles. And I think my worst case scenario is it takes me 3 sprint cycles.
Nice.
And my quote from a vendor was $100,000 in 6 months. And what I did is I spent 2 weeks of his time removing uncertainty. And I think it would be easy for a tech leader to think they should just know that, right? Or they should be able to figure that out in an afternoon. Because I've written code and because I've interacted with a lot of systems, I knew we needed to spend a little time to save a little time.
Yeah.
And so that was that pattern of how do I reduce uncertainty around my solution, I'm a big fan of. And I've told my dev teams, I want failed POCs. I want you to do a proof of concept and decide it's not fit for purpose. If we don't have failed POC, we're training the business that a POC is step 0 of a build. And it shouldn't be. It should be really understanding if something is fit for purpose. I want to see lots of little spikes where we remove technical uncertainty by not writing the whole deployment pipeline from the go, but say, I'm not sure this database can handle the volume we need. Great. Write a Python script that just shoves a volume that's 2x the volume we need, that just shoves it in it. It's with a workload that looks similar, but maybe is made out of random characters, but looks similar to our workload, and make sure it can handle it. Yeah. That should take you like 2 days, right? Go ahead.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think enough leaders, not just in tech, sit back, slow down to speed up, because what you're effectively doing there, you're speeding up, but with a very counterintuitive approach.
Yeah. Do you know what's expensive? 10 months of build that gets clobbered because the database can't handle the throughput and we have to go back and retool. So what we're doing is like, this is kind of industrial age stuff, right? We're preventing retooling.
Yes. which is very costly.
Right.
In fact, I'm not sure if I'm going to get shot for this, and maybe I'll get shot on this podcast for saying this, but this is what I think Agile was supposed to do.
Yes.
The essence of it was that, and it kind of completely got missed. Was to have those experiments.
You want some sound bites from me? Here's my sound bite. I think Agile methodology is currently trapped in a tremendous amount of cargo cult thinking. And so let me unpack that. Right, cargo cult. I'm drawing from the Richard Feynman illustration of folks in the Pacific Ocean after World War II who had seen the American and Allied airplanes landing on the islands. They had seen the guys in the hut with the headphones on, like I have right here, and the cargo came in on the airplanes, and they got candy bars and beer. It was a really good time to be a villager in the Pacific. And then when the Westerners left, they looked around and said, well, they sat in there with coconuts on their ears. I'm sorry, with headphones on their ears. We have coconuts. They look kind of the same. We'll stand out there. We'll get a guy with flags, and let's see if we can get this cargo back. And of course, it didn't work because they didn't understand the root cause of the system they were interacting with. All they knew was how to LARP, live action role play, how to LARP the thing they had seen. And I think we have a whole bunch of Scrum and Agile processes where we're LARPing what we think the behavior ought to be with almost no thought given to what is the system that not, in this case, not the computer system, it's a system of people that produces the computer system. We're not thinking about what that system of people is doing or why we do these rituals around it. We're just doing them as rote religious ceremonies. We even call them ceremonies, right?
Yeah.
And without an understanding of what these ceremonies should be doing, when to do them, when not to do them, maybe some type of workloads, we should do them more frequently than others. We're not thinking about it. We just do we just put the coconuts on our ears and sit in the hut because we think that's what we've been told produces all the cargo to come in, which makes our systems good. And I think it's an absolute failure of thought and understanding of systems thinking.
Yeah, 100%. If I was there, I'd give you a real high five, but I'm going to give you a virtual one. Okay, there you go. High five that. I'm high fiving that. You're absolutely right, and it's really sad that we missed the opportunity. In fact, it's kind of created a bit of toxicity in the space because it hasn't worked. It was never going to work the way they did it, and I think, James, we need to talk more about this stuff to kind of maybe not in the same name, because unfortunately the name's got a bit of a connotation to it in some environments, but in essence, it's this really quite innovative way of doing stuff. So maybe we can do an entire podcast about agile and how we can bring.
I have a VP of engineering that came from another shop, and one of the things he has done is they have a development methodology called Nimble Squared. You will not find anything if you Google Nimble Race 2, because he made it up out of whole cloth, because he's like, I can't use Agile. I can't say Scrum because everybody thinks they know what it means and they start doing the activities. And he said, so I created a new thing, not because we needed a new thing, but I needed a new word so folks wouldn't assume they knew what I was talking about. And if you look at what he does, it's got some things that look like Agile, right? And somebody says, oh, that kind of looks like whatever the Scrum band, the Kanban Scrum combined thing. And I'm like, maybe it is kind of that. But the point was he had to create a new word so that folks wouldn't just assume they knew what was going on. And then he could pick and choose what he put in it and how he did things, and basically lower the rituals and increase the engagement with the folks outside of IT, and put it in there as principles and get away from the cargo cult thinking.
Yeah. I would love to have a conversation about that. In fact, maybe we can even do a podcast together. I don't know. We'll put it out there. Put it out there into the universe.
Open to it.
But I think you're right. So you're right, because I always go back to the values and principles, because they're universal. They're forever things. They make sense when you read them. The common sense in a way, unfortunately, common sense, and it gets masked by this kind of ritualization. So really good takeaway from me. I love that little soundbite, and it's a great way you describe that. So as we're coming towards the closing arc of our time together, James, unfortunately, I just want to ask you, are there any, you mentioned some books, are there any books that you do recommend that you think, do you know what, for aspiring tech leader, that would be a good one to add to your bookshelf? Yes.
So I'm not going to recommend my own book because it's our cookbook, and we
probably
aren't. That's not the audience, right? It's not a leadership book, right? It is how to do analytics with R. As we think about tech leadership, one of the books I love, not because it's a great book, but it's a good book, but it gives us common vocabulary and good reference stories. And that's the Phoenix Project, right?
Yes.
Phoenix Project. If your whole team reads Phoenix Project, they'll begin pointing at each other and laughing and referring to the name of a character in the Phoenix Project, right? You're acting just like, whoever. And it gives a common set of stories and mental models for teams to reference. That's hugely valuable, right? So I got to, once again, my social science background is coming out in that I believe teams can self-organize faster if they have common words, common language, common vocabulary, and a common set of stories that help them understand the world around them. We're really talking about having common mental models is what we're building. And the stories help us do that. And stories do that better than anything else because we got 100,000 years of evolution that's biased us towards stories to understand the world around us. So a book like The Phoenix Project isn't just dumping the facts on us. It's telling us stories of people to illustrate facts. In the same way that, the New Testament of the Bible doesn't give us the rules, it tells us the story, of the Samaritan on the side of the road and the Good Samaritan. It's a story that resonates with us and becomes embedded in our culture, independent of a rule.
Yeah.
And so stories like the Phoenix Project are super helpful for that. So I always recommend that. There's a number of stuff. I think I actually have a copy of his book here that I was flipping through yesterday. Will Larson has written a book called Staff Engineer. He's got like 3 books and a blog, and he's a common podcast guest. So Will Larson, big fan of his writing. He's very thoughtful about tech and engineering. Now the other book that I give a lot of teams, because I have this experience with analytics and I'm heavy over there, is a book called The Lady Tasting Tea. And it is the story of where did all of our statistical tests, things like student t-test, where did they come from? Not the math, the people. So why is it student? Why couldn't he publish under his own name, right? And many folks will know it's because he worked at the Guinness brewery in Dublin, and he couldn't publish under his name because of that. So he published under the name student, and he had a handful of quality control issues he was trying to measure. So it's things like the story behind these things. So I'm a big fan of that book because, once again, it's the story. And if we understand the story, then we have a common language to talk about things.
Yeah, great. Great shares. The Phoenix Project actually has been, it's one of the most popular ones that's been shared on here. So I think there's a signal there to our techies out there. Read it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And once, it's not like you're going to want your non-technical spouse to read that book.
Yeah.
If they're probably going to be like, whatever. It's not a great work of fiction, right? What it is an incredibly illustrative example of the function and dysfunction in and around software development teams that if everyone on the team is read, we can then use to illustrate our own and talk about our own function and dysfunction within the team. So it's common stories, common vocabulary, common language, even know the names of the characters. And that is so helpful, right? So it's a means to the end. The book isn't a great end in and of itself. It's a means to a discussion end inside of your own team.
Yeah. And that's why it's so great, because it makes people, it's like a mirror. It puts up a mirror and goes, have a look, where do you fit in this picture, or what picture do you see? So that's great. I'm going to offer you a wish now. I love this bit. Okay. I'm going to give you a wish from a tech genie. I'm going to be a tech genie for a second. I'm coming out of a techie lamp of some sort. Okay. And offering a wish for your leadership, for your industry. What would you wish from the tech genie?
From the tech genie, I'm somewhat anchored because of our conversation, right? So we discussed a couple of themes that I would love to see more of, right? Systems thinking. We discussed human empathy. Those two keep jumping out at me, and I'm torn between, do I want more systems thinking or do I want more empathy? If I had more empathy, would that result in more system thinking? Not necessarily. Some combination of more of those would make my organization, most organizations, the economy, our politics, fact-based decision-making and thinking around your systems as opposed to dogma-based systems, and thinking. Tremendous. Add a splash of empathy on there, and the effectiveness goes way up because you understand how the systems are impacting people, and ultimately all of our systems impact people in some way. And so if we can have the combination of the two of those, we can be a lot more effective.
I'm going to try and make that wish come true. I think that's a beautiful blend. And it speaks again to that kind of emergent outcomes, create the blend and
Correct.
See what comes up from that. And I think, but there's an intuition that it feels like a good blend. I don't know if it's going to work, but it feels kind of right. So absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's very self-serving because it frees me up from having to micromanage the teams, which I don't want to do and they don't want me to do. And it allows me thinking about the strategic vision of what things do we need to build and why. So I can be at a higher level of abstraction, as an executive that should be thinking about our strategy of where we're going forward, not doing deep dives into the team to understand how they failed to understand a user requirement because they lacked empathy with the accountant. Right. Which is sometimes when I'm having to lead that conversation, we're in a state of failure. And I'm trying to get us out of it.
Yeah.
Because if things are working well, I'm at a different level of abstraction and thinking about what are we going to need to support this line of business when it becomes 500 million, not what's going on with our logs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a different mindset that you need to keep building up and collapsing, and they don't quite work well together. I know what you're pointing towards there.
And the reality is a leader has to do both, right? You've got to be at the high level abstract, and periodically you got to come down. And I don't mean to, what I don't want is anybody that I work with to hear it and be like, oh my God, James was talking to us about tactical things on the team level. He thought we failed. No, I'm not. Like, it's real to have to do that. It's a little bit like my comments earlier about heroics. Yeah. Periodically, there's a need for heroics, but if that's what's needed to keep your business running, you're in a state of failure. Yeah. So similarly, I'm going to come down to the teams and make small adjustments and talk to them about what's working, what isn't, so I can understand the patterns. That's not failure. If I got to be in there every week, that's failure. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes. I think you're right. And again, it speaks to the agile values, the 4 sets of sentences where they have a balance between the two. You have 2 halves of a sentence, and we're not saying one is overpowering the other. We're just going to say we're going to spend a bit more time on this as opposed to the one on the right. So again, it's around finding that balance, and this is where the art of leadership comes in. So that's brilliant. So as we come to our final full stop, Jane,
yes,
what's your final key takeaway? What's your gift that you want to leave to our tech leader audience as we part company?
Oh gosh, so this is the part where my public speaking training says I should invoke a call to action. So my call to action for my tech leaders is understand how technology impacts your balance sheet and your income statement, and not just your budget. You can understand your budget inside and out, your tech budget, and you do not understand half of how technology impacts your balance sheet and income statement, because it's impacting all of the other aspects of your business. Your budget is just the part that your CFO is holding you accountable for every quarter or every year, whatever frequency you do budgeting. Your real impact and your real cost is elsewhere on the balance sheet and income statement.
Word up. Wonderful note to finish on. I think that's a great takeaway. Thank you for your time, James. It's been wonderful having you on CTO Confessions.
Thank you. It's been fantastic.